The Mythology of Proto Fascism. Take a really good look at Berlin in about April 1945. Examine the rubble of one of the major cultural centres of European history, and you are looking at the end game of fascism. A game which ends in mass murder, with everyone sitting in Nuremberg claiming that they were only doing their job or just following orders. Perfectly reasonable, sensible people working their way through every day, raising a family, going to church, and working in an office making sure the trains run on time, especially towards southern Poland. We executed the ringleaders and a few lower agents of the Nazi era, but we did not get them all. The ones who had value for our democracies were spirited away, and in the case of America, after Operation Paperclip, were relocated in Huntsville, Alabama, a location much noted for its approach to civil liberties and human decency. There they can build missiles and spaceships for the land of the free. No matter if you were an SS colonel who walked past slave labourers and didn't notice the ones hung on crane gibbets, when democracy calls, Hollywood will always make a film about you telling the myth as it needs to be told. Ah, the Californian Dream Factory. Can we imagine what they are going to make up about 2020? However, speculation and fantasy have no place in a podcast about mythologies. We need to uncover facts. We need truths. We need objective truths. Well, that is what we all subjectively think, is it not? We have to start right back at the beginning on this one, a place we love to start at on Mythologies podcast, and consider what that word fascism actually means. Everyone knows it, but if we ask directly, who can say what it means? Can you? What is your definition of fascism right now? Probably you can see the problem straight away. This is a word often hijacked by populists as a label of condemnation, a moral curse visited upon anyone who favours a uniform approach to life. Yet fascism is a political philosophy. It is not a licence for mass murder, any more than being a liberal is a reason to give your own personal money away to poor people. As a philosophy, it espouses the principal idea that people and society fare much better when they are led by a centralised organisation which works for the well-being of the state. The thought process concludes that when the state is strong and powerful, so too are the people of the state strong and powerful. In such findings, the motive force of social organisation is that the people harness themselves to the interests of the state as dictated by leaders who have the will and capacity to lead and govern. There is nothing genocidal or murderous generally in this political philosophy, and it is merely an intellectual expression of system management within social structures. When we say fascism, this is really what we're talking about. In terms of its mythology, it cannot be clearer. As with any solid, well-constructed mythology, it has to own appropriate metaphors. The word fascist is sunk deep into its metaphor and owns a symbol of sticks bound together around an axe. This bundle of sticks, in Latin fascis, meaning bundle, states that what individually is easily snapped and broken, when harnessed as a bundle tied to an axe, becomes strong and unbreakable. Fascis becomes the word fascist in political rhetoric. There is nothing about the sticks which speaks about the right sort of stick or the wrong sort of stick. If you're making a fascis, then you don't want to be burning sticks, because that doesn't make you stronger. You need all of the sticks, every shape and every size, every colour and every hue. A stick is a stick is a stick. The sticks themselves are unimportant, so the myth goes. It is the state which binds them that is of the greater consequence. Thinking about this political philosophy, we have to ask how exactly we end up with death camps and millions of murdered civilians, whilst Europe goes up in flames. The social management philosophy of political fascism is not of itself the problem. It is just a political myth structure. The issue is where it always is in history. It is with the people who buy into the myth and accept it as a governing principle of their own life. In the myth of German fascism, that acceptance of the myth facilitated a people feeling dispossessed and despised after the First World War to find a psychological strength in blaming others whilst describing themselves as superior human beings. This process of blaming a convenient other, the fault always being with the outsider, is the underlying psychology of prejudice, always a powerful incitement to extremes of behaviour. This is the petri dish of resentment which allows the poison ivy of the management cult to grow and stretch itself across a society. Ordinary people who felt powerless in their lives found a power in the state and took that power to their hearts as they signed away all morality and in a daily mundanity conspired to murder other human beings. This was never about a political philosophy and always about the weakness of people in the hands of a potent myth structure run by deeply psychologically and intellectually inadequate men. We know these men are psychologically and intellectually inadequate because they prefer, as their first choice, to wear a military uniform with medals as an expression of their socio-political identity, a form of erectile dysfunction which can only be treated by the sight of other people suffering, being tortured and killed. Naturally, the more dangerous of these damaged individuals lurk in suits which they construe as uniforms, but present as ubiquity. In this mythic analysis, we see that it is in the nature of people and their behaviour that the horrors of our humanity bear dreadful fruit. The problem with fascism is not and in of itself as a political idea, but the fact that it creates conditions in which the worst of our nature thrives. In the rejection of personal importance and the assertion of a group dynamic as preeminent purpose, we find the ability to perform any task without sensing personal responsibility. The state takes away all responsibility from the individual, and that individual places all accountability for personal actions on the state. I'm just doing my job. Set free from the meaning of a stick, we submerge all responsibility into the bundle. Such an easy let-out clause from responsibility immediately appeals to the psychology of the powerless, because they do not have to stand their ground on any issue. Into every nook and cranny the herd of human society will seep and fill up small dark ponds of administrative management which can be conducted at distance without human consequence. History has long been aware that warfare changed profoundly when we could murder at distance rather than personally in hand-to-hand fighting. A man in a bunker can launch a missile and kill 1 million people without anything like the psychological damage he would sustain if he had to take an axe to each and every one of those lives. Social distancing is not a new concept, and it does not have to be exclusively about group well-being. The Air Force personnel who sit in underground offices watching computers as they guide drone attacks into groups of civilians on hillsides in Afghanistan are socially distanced. The executive who makes 6,000 people redundant is socially distanced. The politician who travels first class as he or she decide who gets healthcare is socially distanced. We have to take great care about this term, because it is neither ambiguous nor passive. In this socially distanced world, especially in the United Kingdom, we are seeing an environment being created which can be described as proto-fascist. Proto-fascist means that the current condition does not espouse fascism as a political or guiding philosophy, but creates the conditions in which fascism can easily emerge as a virulent mind virus and unleash the behaviours of people which are ultimately genocidal. We need to take a deep breath here and think very clearly about the social myth structure we are currently evolving. This is the critical question posed by our social times in 2020. There is every need to be critical of this proposition. We need to accept every insight into possible counter-arguments. But what we cannot do is dismiss this viewpoint entirely and out of hand. The evidence is growing that something really bad is happening in our society. Everybody senses it. Everyone is feeling this as the world changes around them in unexpected ways. At the moment, we only have anecdotal data and little hard-nosed, evidentially qualified material. Consequently, the purpose here is to suggest that we need to start making up that gap, even if it is to dismiss the idea of proto-fascism. Armed with every sense of rationality and academic rigour, we need to start by considering the anecdotal, because it is always the birthplace of quality research. There is a wealth of stress being experienced by people in universities, in healthcare, in policing, in self-employment, in social services, and within the fabric of our socio-economic structure, which is all related directly to this concept of proto-fascism. Pressures on people still in jobs are increasing daily. The cult of management is increasingly making demands which the employee fails to fulfill at the risk of redundancy. Just doing our jobs has become our mechanism for survival. As we labour under the psychological oppression, we find all avenues of challenge or critical evaluation of what we are doing becoming closed to us. Even within the dreadful management cult, it is staffed by ordinary people who are just doing their jobs as they place demands on stressed out employees and fail to see human consequence. In the worst case scenarios, the administrative management is redefining reality as their own needs and purpose. There is a growing common experience that if you question any service or consumer product, social or commercial, you are seen as a problem and treated as one. You are seen as a complaining and problematic outsider. The management cult defends itself not with efficiency, but with psychologically prepared scripts which deny all responsibility and place the cause of any problem back on the person complaining. In the nooks and crannies of this management cult, ordinary people are just doing their jobs and grateful that they still have them. This is exactly how you end up with death camps. An extreme extrapolation, perhaps. It is only natural to doubt such a suggestion. However, the tipping point at which a society has moved from life-affirming to genocidal has never been clearly identified in our dreadful history of slaughter. When was the moment Russia began to embrace the mass slaughter of its own population? When was the time when Germany as a population began to conspire towards mass murder? At what point did Kosovo, Cambodia, Rwanda, Vietnam, the list goes on, tip towards a society which permitted horror rather than challenge it? If we simply dismiss the road sign towards death camps because the end destination looks far away, then you are failing to comprehend what social topography can hide just beyond the next green hillside. If you can recognise something uncomfortable in your workplace, in your social world, and in your engagement with any service, commercial or social, If you can sense in the shadows of stress which are haunting our days something worrying, then are you seeing the signs of Proto Fascism? Is a new mythology of fascism about to emerge?